What up, perps? Kid Copious back in effect. Purple State Party. You know what we're doing here? We're repping America, the center, and common sense. Got an interesting show today. I'm going to try to be more informative, less political. I think that's what the world needs. But anyhow, let's kick it off, baby. So as somebody who goes to a lot of concerts, I was really happy to see this, that Ticketmaster owner Live Nation is running a monopoly and has been overcharging fans. This happened in a New York jury, came back with their verdict after 4 days of deliberation. The long and short of it is that the reason why our country and other countries do their best to bust up monopolies is because when there's no competition, they can just charge what they want. And I'm fine paying the higher ticket prices. I understand that, when I was growing up, artists made a lot of money off of album sales and things like that. And that's not the case anymore. A lot of their music, they just kind of have to give away, and they get a nickel every time you play it on Spotify. But what Live Nation and Ticketmaster have done is just insane, because they're making so many fees. Believe it or not, the younger people in the audience, their mind might be blown by this, but we used to just stand in line at a record shop and buy our tickets. We didn't have all of this internet and bots that were out there buying them up, and ticket brokers. Yeah, they were there, but not like they are now. And, Ticketmaster and Live Nation do a lot to spurn that kind of activity. They do it themselves, in fact. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was something really interesting. I learned something about this stuff called brown fat. Brown fat is in your body, and it's usually, around your spine, your neck, and things like that. And it's used to heat the body. And you can increase your amount of brown fat. They say cold showers, sleeping in cold environments, regular exercise, eating foods that are high in leafy greens, meat, seafood, beans, green tea and turmeric. Turmeric is something I use. I take turmeric every single day. It has really helped out with kind of releasing some of the muscle tension that I get from walking a lot during the day. But, it just goes to show you that, even at my advanced age, late 50s, you can still learn stuff. And regular exercise converts white fat, which is the stuff that just kind of hangs around no matter what you do. You can convert it into what's called gray or beige fat, which behaves similarly to brown fat. In other words, if you spend some time exercising and having capsaicin and iron, you start building up this brown fat. You could go out into the cold environment and burn some of this stuff off. It's really interesting. I can't cover it all here, but I just found it interesting that we have different fats in our bodies. And, it is very important to constantly be educating yourself, growing as a person mentally. There's a lot of studies out there that say that that's one way to stave off things like dementia, by constantly growing new parts of your brain, neural pathways as you learn things, I'm 57. I'm trying to learn Spanish. I'm trying to learn about art. I'm trying to learn about, the body. I just really recommend it to everybody. Pick up a hobby, find a hobby, go to a museum. I met somebody the other day at work who had only been to one museum, and she wanted to get more into art. And I said, go to the Norton Simon. It's in Pasadena. It's a great museum. It's got a very wide range of artwork there. And just try to figure out who is your favorite artist. And before I close out with the art, I just want to say one thing on modern art. I have finally figured out modern art. It's about how it makes you feel. A lot of it seems like there's not much talent in it. We could argue that a different day. But, it's how you feel. And for the record, I like Van Gogh, I like Monet, and I love Bob Ross. So anyhow, let's move on to this. This is an interesting thing. This is an Italian evening social ritual called passeggiata. And it's just after dinner, sometime between 5 and 8 p.m., they just walk through the city center. It's not an exercise thing. It's not a way to burn calories. This is a seen and be seen custom aimed at socializing, window shopping, and enjoying a gelato as a slow-paced, non-workout community gathering. And I do a lot of walking. So I don't know if I need another evening walk, but my daughter and her husband do this a lot, and it's something that's lacking. We make these connections online with people from around the world, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But being in touch with your neighbors is so important. You break it down. We're a country, we're a state, we're a city, we're neighbors. And maybe just getting back to socializing a little bit more with people face to face. Maybe we could start to turn this corner and get out of these two camps that we live in right now, this red and blue camps that we live in, and become, like I always say, more purple. Lots of people out there agree with you, even though you don't think they do. So this next one really hits close to home. There was a report that came out from the Center Square that the cost of living is pricing Californians out of the state. They're moving to Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, even Wyoming. And it's mostly rising house costs. And the reason why that's important is because housing costs in California are very much dictated by the government and all of these goddamn environmental boards that we have. We're going to get a little more into one of them in a minute here. But they did this thing. It was published by the California Policy Lab in March. And it shows that people who were paying an average of $2,376 a month in housing costs in California, after leaving the state, they were paying $1,705 a month in housing costs. That's a savings of about $600 right there. I understand. I've lived here all my life in California. I understand the benefits of California. We have lots of activities around us. You can go to the beach, you can go to the snow, and all of that stuff. But that doesn't give the government the right to price us out, to say, oh, well, we have this really great thing, so we're going to make it really expensive. I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent here, but it's one of the things that irritates me the most. Because so much of what you take, for example, we have banned plastic bags. So now we all have to live with paper bags. You have to ask for straws. They want to ban plastic cutlery. But then, as we're going to see, they don't do anything about all of these illegal aliens, drug addicts, and crazy people who are just living everywhere on the streets. I saw one the other day that just stretched as far as I could see. Yeah, it was tucked in by the rail tracks. It was sort of out of the way. But there's problems with this. There's problems with the way our government is approaching things, while meanwhile making it more expensive. Here's a great example. The Long Beach fireworks, which is a 4th of July tradition called the Big Bang at the Bay, was canceled after the California Coastal Commission denied a permit for its signature fireworks show. This is so monumental that even Newsom is coming out on it. He came out and said, well, his press office said, that this is not a decision the governor made. Our office is looking into the matter on behalf of the people of Long Beach. Yeah, because, you have these angry militant leftists who are given an ounce of power and they just wield it willy-nilly. That's the problem we have right now in California, is that every left-wing nutbag is backed up by the left-wing government. And they're just allowed to run rampant and make these kind of decisions. They actually came out and said, oh, maybe you should do a drone show. Well, the guy who owns the boathouse on the bay, who does this, event organizer John Morris, said, if you were to make a display that was equal in size, it would require about 1,000 drones and cost roughly $200,000 versus $50,000 for fireworks. And this guy, the Big Bang on the Bay, has raised about $2 million for youth organizations. But no, California Coastal Commission is like, no. For what reason? They don't have to give one. They just make it up. They just make it up. They just say, no, we don't want that. We don't want fun. We don't like fireworks, so we're just going to shut it down. Meanwhile, homeless and encampment-related fires noticeably increased in L.A. Long Beach is really close to L.A., in case you didn't know that. You know, every single day, all right, every single day, 46 fires are started by homeless encampments. From January to mid-December of 2025, there were 16,000 fires. That's using up our resources and putting our emergency personnel further away from where emergency calls could be. They're out on the road. And last month, a Larchmont family lost their home and 2 dogs. They pleaded with the LAPD to kick these squatters out, but they did nothing, and they burned down the house. You know, they have become routine. This person, Sidney Johnson, said the fires have become routine. Palm trees near their apartment, including those by nearby schools, are charred by repeated fires. Encampment fires can be explosives. The LA Fire Department Battalion Chief, George Permer, said, typically we see combustible metals, flammable liquids, gasoline, diesel, and a lot of times lithium-ion batteries. So it's inherently dangerous. These people are methed out magpies who collect everything. You know, and looking at this, combustible metals, much like lithium-ion batteries, extremely hard to put out. They have propane tanks that explode. You know, in 2024, a firefighter had to have his ear surgically reattached. See, this is the point that I'm trying to make here. You're banning fireworks, but not encampments. You're making California so expensive that regular folks can't live here, but drug addicts, crazy people, and yes, illegal aliens, it's free. Just post a tent somewhere and see if it lasts. And that's ridiculous. There's nothing compassionate about it. There's no compassion in it at all. And it's prioritizing the people who are not willing to play along, who are not willing to pay taxes, who are not willing to pay utilities, not willing to pay rent, who just want to live on the streets. And they come from all across our country and all across the world now. And they just camp wherever they want. And randomly, shit's going to happen. Homeless crime and illegal alien crime are 2 things we could stop simply by ending those policies. We protect illegal aliens here, and we let drug addicts just post up a tent right next to a school. Yeah, well, there's nothing we can do about it. Bullshit. You know, California is one of those states that likes to brag about how few prisoners they have, and they like to close prisons and stuff. Is that what we really want for our children? Because keep in mind, any issue, anything medical, health-wise, government-wise, anything, almost everything on this planet gets worse as time goes by. You look at the RV encampments and the tent encampments that we have around Los Angeles and imagine what that's going to be like when the number doubles. You know, does California want every homeless person in the country to come here and strain our resources? We don't have enough money. We don't have enough money for our budget this year, and yet we want more people to siphon off the teat of government cash. It's bullshit. And when they make it so expensive, it really is. It's the salt in the wound. So last week I brought up this AI from Anthropic called Mythos. And they were running Mythos on systems. A report entitled Assessing Claude Mythos Previews Cybersecurity Capabilities. And this AI model, was finding vulnerabilities that have been in these systems for 10 to 20 years, as well as one that was 27 years old in a program called OpenBSD. It's a free open source operating system known for its strong focus on security, correctness, and code transparency. It's designed to support reliable and secure computing environments by proactively identifying and fixing vulnerabilities. And this damn thing had a vulnerability. The reason I bring it up is one of the things that I've noticed recently is that we tend to just openly embrace without any sort of vetting anything that's new. AI would just let it run rampant until it really becomes a problem. E-scooters, e-bikes. Yeah, I rail against those things. One of the reasons I do is because these things are dangerous. They're dangerous. I see kids driving electric bikes, electric scooters. Sometimes they have little kids with them that they're taking to school. And everybody thinks, oh, this is so great. But it's not. It's fraught with problems. Fires. Accidents, deaths. But we just want to embrace it because it's new. And that reminds me of the left wing, the progressives. You know, at one point, I think progressives had a lot of validity to them. Our world was really stuck in the past. We were stuck in a dumb way of thinking, and they did break us free. But now, they just want to go along with every nut burger that comes down the pike. I don't even know if that's a saying. So last week, it came out that Eric Swalwell is leaving Congress. He's not going to run for governor anymore. And, according to Steve Tavares, he's an East Bay political journalist and author. They've basically known about Eric Swalwell since 2013. And this journalist Tavares, he tried to get the women to come forth back then, but, they were scared. This guy has power, and he was going to wield it against them. But he also wrote that the home base was limited. Swalwell's base of support at home is strikingly thin, he said. And the reason is that even though Swalwell has, just like every Democrat, opposed Donald Trump, he supports law enforcement. He supports border security. And he has an unwavering backing of Israel. And these are bad things? So that's why the left, the Democrats, are so dead to me. Because you can't support law enforcement. You can't support border security. Right now, they're seemingly supporting Iran. It's ridiculous. But, they want to embrace the bright, shiny things. Here's another bright, shiny thing that went down the toilet. Beyond Meat. That fake meat. It crashed from $200 a share into penny stock territory. And because it is closed below $1 a share for 30 consecutive days, they're thinking of delisting it, though you can't even buy it. The CEO got a raise, though, and he blames Americans and their cyclical retail habits. Well, let me tell you something, okay? Meat is one of the most important things you can eat. It is the most important thing you can eat. It contains the proteins, the amino acids, iron, other vitamins and minerals, okay? This fake meat crap, we don't need it. We don't need bioengineered meat paste. It's just frightening how, so many people get so up in arms about things like gluten and genetically modified foods and things like that, but then they'll just stick this goop into their mouth and pretend that they're having a burger. And it's the real stuff, man. It's the real stuff. Well, and it's crashing. And why is it crashing? Because people are starting to wake up to the fact that maybe there are some things from the old days that remain viable. That's the way I look at it. That's the way I see it. Okay? I mean, I know that in my childhood there were views that I'm glad are gone. Okay? I'm glad that more and more people are accepting of the LGBT community. I'm glad more people are accepting of religious and non-religious views. I'm glad. I'm happy for that. I'm glad that we have tried to clean up our environment. We've put an emphasis on it. It's gone too far, but I'm glad that at least we're looking at it and we no longer just think throwing trash out the window is acceptable. I'm not a big fan of impeachments. I think a lot of what the Democrats tried to do to Trump was just, quite frankly, trumped up charges. They did the same thing with the dumb felonies. I don't like this. I don't like the way that we have gotten into this death loop, I think, death spiral of, worrying more about your team winning than how they're playing the game. Minnesota Democrats have united to block the Waltz and Ellison impeachment push, sparking online outrage from conservatives. In Minnesota right now, they've had these massive fraud scandals. Upwards of $19 billion lost to scammers. That's sad. In a day and age where every dollar counts, fraud is what makes it so hard for cities and states to function, because they're losing this money. This money is gone. I mean, on 14 Medicaid programs under Tim Walz's administration, $9 billion went bye-bye. And now the conservatives would like to impeach Walz and investigate this further. But the Democrats should be doing that. I mean, that's what we elected these people for. I mean, that is, at the end of the day, my point in all of this, is that our politicians need to start doing the right thing. Every politician needs to be like a John Fetterman, where they just stand up and say, you know what, I can't go along with this. Because that's what we're living in right now. I recently told somebody that my faith in God and Jesus got stronger when I left the church, because I knew what I believed. I wasn't believing it because the person next to me believed it, and I wasn't believing it because some guy up at the front of the congregation was telling me to believe it. I believed it because I believed it, and I knew I believed it. And that's where we need to get to with politics. We have to stand on our own feet and just say, no, enough is enough. I don't believe this. I'm not going along with this. Right? I don't like it. I don't like it. Like a state like fucking Kansas changes their driver's license to no longer allow trans people to identify on their driver's license how they see fit. What's that shit for? What's that for? All right? Anyhow, you know what? Let's wrap this up. I want to tell you the story about Taffy. Taffy 1, 2, and 3. Because they just found one of the ships. The USS Johnston. This was, back in World War II. I'm looking for it right here. October 25th, 1944. So they're down in the Philippines, right? And we've landed some people in the Leyte Gulf. And we're starting to take on the Japanese in the Philippines. And the Japanese kind of did a few feint maneuvers, and they got William Halsey and the 7th Fleet, which was very strong and had a lot of aircraft and all that. They got them to divert from where the landings had taken place. And then a pretty powerful group of Japanese fleet, powerful group of Japanese ships, including, where is it? I want to say it's the Yamato. The Yamato. Was going to slide in through the backside, because the Philippines are a bunch of little islands, so you can kind of navigate through the islands. You can kind of keep yourself hidden. Well, all of a sudden, this fleet breaks out, and they're headed towards the over 100,000 U.S. troops that had landed, and they're going to just wipe them out. Well, this small group, these escort carriers and their destroyers, which was Taffy 1, 2, and 3, right? They were supposed to be there to kind of provide shore support and patrol for submarines, and they couldn't really take on these big giant battleships and stuff, right? But the commander of the Johnson, Commander Ernest Evans, he didn't hesitate. He and his destroyers and escort carriers turned at the Japanese and went after them. And for 2.5 hours, they just kept these guys at bay until they were eventually sunk. And, he was one of just 2 commanders to earn a Congressional Medal of Honor. He earned it posthumously because he was dead. But that's what America used to be. America used to be the Taffy 1, 2, 3. We used to stand up for what's right. We used to unite behind what's right. It's gross right now that we're finally taking on Iran, who quite frankly is everybody's enemy. Because even if you are allied with Iran, like Russia or China, eventually Iran's doctrines of, destroy the world until they're all Muslim, will come back on these countries and escalate our the conditions around the world. They want a nuclear weapon, and they've said that they want that nuclear weapon as a deterrence. Of course, that's the cover story, but they've also said that they would like to wipe out Israel. And once they start wiping out Israel and launching missiles into other countries, especially if they're nuclear or dirty nuclear, dirty bombs. Dirty bombs are they're not nuclear explosions, but they contain radioactive material that then gets dispersed. If we don't take care of Iran now, we might not be able to do so in the future. They already have ballistic missiles that could reach England. So, we can argue whether or not they'll make it that way. But we used to unite behind that kind of stuff. But now, if it's directed by, if it was directed by Biden, the Democrats were for it. If it was directed by Trump, the Democrats are against it. Always remember what happened in the early days of the COVID pandemic. You had Democrat leaders saying they would not take a vaccine developed under Trump. But then when Biden won the election, they all started touting and, in fact, forcing the vaccine on people. This day needs to end, okay? This has to end. We need to get back to common sense governing where we do the right things. Like here in LA, we need to clean up the encampments. I don't give a shit if you have to build more prisons. You're wasting money on a bullet train. You're wasting money on homeless services. You're wasting money across the board here in California, just pissing it away. Put it into a prison and clean up the damn streets because these people are not going to clean up for themselves. They're not. I already know. I know the life of an addict. They're not going to do it themselves. Crazy people are not going to take their medicine. And illegal aliens, they need to be rounded up and shipped back. I don't want to have to make those statements. I'd rather be able to show compassion, but we're way past that now. It is a giant problem here in California, and it will only get worse, and it will only get more violent and more dangerous. All right? It's not about not liking these people. It's about the common sense. It's about supporting the taxpayers, the people who grind every day to earn money for their family and pay their damn taxes. This is not a government that is supposed to be about pissing money away, supporting criminals, supporting people living on the streets, supporting crazy people setting fires by the side of freeways. It's not what government is supposed to be. We are way off base with that. And the worst part is, the only way that they counter is by saying, yeah, but I hate Trump. It's not good enough, folks. I'm Kid Copious. I'm Purple State Party. So are you. Love one another. Keep on grinding. And, go to a concert. Dance it out.